Hello everyone. Welcome to another Crystallize YouTube live stream. Here today with Håkon. Hello Håkon.
Hello.
Today will be a really interesting thing we're going to be talking about, where actually Håkon will give us quite a bit of input on a pretty weird, how do you call that, Håkon? Like a
Weird, no.
Not a weird, but it's somewhat.
I would say like an overlooked opportunity.
Yeah, unexpected. Okay, yeah, sure. And yeah, sure thing. And as you can see from the thumbnail of the video, I'd say that it's a pretty. That's what we just have been discussing. That's pretty. It's explaining quite a few things just by looking at the image, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
big scary JavaScript monster, and so
it's,
cool.
Yeah, I like the illustration we got here. I totally forgot we made this. Actually, 2 years ago, we launched a comic that used this as the final frame.
Yep.
We can link to it in the YouTube description.
For those that are interested.
Yeah, it's a fun.
Beautiful. So this controversial, let's say, topic, removing JavaScript to be faster. I guess we can just start talking a little bit about that, like a small introduction of how, why, and how come, perhaps, this thing came to be.
Mm-hmm.
So
should I just kick it off?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, because so when I mentioned that this is an overlooked opportunity, it's not entirely true, because it is a visible performance problem that we're going to talk about today. But anyway, so let's start off by quickly explaining why we are here today. And the reason that we are even having this talk is that the front-end community and the entire field has moved so incredibly fast. And we have so many tools now that we didn't have a couple of years ago even. And all of these fantastic tools, like for instance, Next.JS, which is a topic of this talk, but also other ones like Gatsby, and you've got Vue, we got Preact, Svelte, and there's all these awesome libraries. They give you so much power as a front-end developer, and sometimes you get blinded a bit by all that magic that you're getting. That sometimes it's easy to forget one of the segments of the users that you're building your website for. So today,
sort of misusing it, you can say, sort of misusing it, or not, more like
not misusing it, I would say, but it's kind of with all these fantastic tools, there's also really big ecosystems around them with a whole bunch of plugins and stuff you can add. And it's really easy to make a really fantastic interactive site with all these cool widgets and stuff. It doesn't take a whole lot to make, but on the way there, you're making sacrifices that maybe not everyone is aware of.
Yeah. So the end product, basically, it's a bit too much stuff.
Yeah, and I guess the illustration that we got here covers it. So if we back up 10 years or so, the typical way of delivering a website was basically HTML and CSS, and there was a bit of JavaScript next to it. And with the recent development of the Jamstack sites, we're seeing that tip somehow. So now the majority of the code that you download is typically JavaScript instead of HTML and CSS. The reason being is that, well, you need your framework files, like the runtime JavaScript needed for the framework. In in this case, Next.js to run. And then you need your own application code to run, and potentially all of the different plugins and all that you got going on. Typically not a big problem, especially if you're testing with a high-end computer, which developers tend to have.
Yep.
And in fact, let me show you an example, and I'm going to use our own boilerplate as a good example. So I'm going to share my screen here. I think this is the one. Yeah, there we go. So this is the deployment of our boilerplate. Running on Next.js. We got boilerplates for other frameworks too. But now let's just focus on this one. So if we check out the source code here, there's a whole bunch of CSS going on in the beginning here. And then in the end, well, it's kind of hard to see here, but we're injecting, we're injecting JavaScript. Well, it's easier for me to show you the actual thing that's happened. So I'm gonna be reloading now to show you the network activity that's going on. Hello. Oh, it was just so fast. Oh. Anyways, so in terms of requests, let me zoom in a little bit. It's not that it takes up a whole lot of resources, but it does take up, So roughly almost a bit more than a third of the requests, which is good for a lot of cases, but sometimes it's not really a good thing. And the problem that we talk about today is not necessarily related to the download size, although this has an effect as well. Yeah, it's the work. It's the actual work that the browser has to do when it fetches these files and parses them. And then essentially what all these frameworks do, they will take the server rendered state and recreate it on the client side, essentially doing the job once more. So this requires two things. You need, or three things, or probably more than that as well. But you need an initial server state, essentially like a rendered page, which can be statically generated or rendered on demand. Secondly, you need that rendered server state to pass down a state representation and basically a huge JavaScript object with the entire client state at the time of rendering, so that you know how to recreate the markup that was just sent. And additionally, you need all the framework files, and you need to do all that work on the client side of recreating the entire application from the state that you got and from the JavaScript files of basically your application again.
So basically like code logic that actually does that.
Yeah.
Transformation.
And all of these steps. Yeah. So everything like this happens really fast if you're on a powerful device, but and it kind of happens in the background, because you get the HTML and CSS and you get to look at this chair that we got going in here, and it's a wonderful flamingo portrait. And while you look at that, all this work that we mentioned is happening in the background. And because JavaScript in the browser is single-threaded, runs not really effectively, this will also block the thread that also takes care of all the UI things like scrolling. That can be impacted if your CPU on a device is very busy, and it is very busy on certain devices when it's doing all this rehydration. So all this is really theory talk, really. What we can do to find out if it is a problem, we can run an audit with deployed sites. You can use Lighthouse here in your browser, for instance, or you can use an online tool, which we often use. PageSpeed Insights, for instance, will tell you. Yeah, let's just wait for the results, and I'll pinpoint things that matter. So if you look at this guy, we're getting a pretty good score from the beginning, but the time to interactive and the total blocking time are not in the green zone. We really want them, like these guys, we really want them to be better than what they are, even though it's not a huge problem here. So this is the time it takes for for the entire document to feel interactive for the user, and this is measured with a simulation. So they're simulating a medium powered cell phone, usually an Android, on a medium to slow network connection. So the thing we have to be careful about, though, is that the bigger the page you're serving, the more penalty you're getting. Does it make sense?
Yeah, for sure. But it's not only the widgets and things that you use, it is actual, like maybe complexity on the different sides of the page. So, you know, we have had the discussion quite a few days back with carousel and things like that, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Actually, so the logic and all of that you add in the front end.
Yeah, you're spot on. So the more things that are happening on the client side, the worse it is, really. Yeah. So if you have a whole bunch of things happening immediately after the page is loaded, that's going to slow down. The device is going to take up CPU resources. Essentially, what you're doing is you're blocking the user's path. If they want to navigate, if they want to scroll, if they want to interact in any kind, which people tend to want to do. Yeah.
More than looking at a few fancy visuals.
Yeah. Then you're essentially blocking them. Yeah. Now I created an example for this specific stream here. I'm going to toggle this as well, so we can see a bit more. This is a really long blog post with dummy text, basically. But it's basically all text, and there's images, and a lot of it. Essentially, the document size is quite big, and the text here that we're seeing on screen is rendered not as HTML. It's rendered as individual React elements to have maintained full control. So if we do a speed test for this one, we can compare with the relatively good front page. We'll do a speed test for this. We will probably see, now we're doing it live, so who knows, but I have reason to believe we're not getting as good of a score here. Let's just wait for the results to come in. There we go. So we can see that the time to interact has gotten significantly worse. The same as Lara's Contentful Paint, but we can do another analysis here to make sure, but let's not bother. I think this is fine. So this is a very heavy page. There's a lot of rehydration that needs to happen on the Next.js side. So it will be slow. It's not going to be slow on your high-end laptop or on, a very modern phone. But it is going to be slow, and it's going to be
users.
Yeah. So depending on who your users are, but
yeah. So, but you also need to care about, because since Google cares about that, then you should be caring about that as well.
That is a good point.
Yeah, right? Because it affects performance, which affects essentially position.
Yeah, so not all search engines do a performance audit of web pages they want to rank, but Google is doing that. And if you're not scoring good in terms of performance, you're not getting as good as a rank that you could have gotten, essentially. Essentially, it's really easy. Like, fix the performance and get the better ranking. It's also been proven that the faster the website, the better the conversion rate for e-commerce businesses. So obviously, as a user, you would like to have a snappy website that reacts to your interactions. Makes a whole lot of sense. So the title of this talk is to, what was it again? Speeding up by removing JavaScript?
Exactly.
Okay, so let's do that. So removing JavaScript doesn't mean redoing everything. It actually means removing JavaScript from the browser. Like, don't download all that server state. Don't download the framework files. Don't rehydrate on the client side. So there's an obvious benefit here, and that's you're shipping less stuff to the user, and it's the UI is not going to get blocked because it's, the CPU is busy with hydrating your app. So this is very good for initial load performance. And to show you how much, I've done just that. I'm going to do here. So if you add no runtime JS to the URL that we showed before, got furniture, super fast shop, and then no runtime JS, and you look at that, I've actually removed all client-side JS here. So all you're getting is HTML and CSS. We can check, I haven't done this though. So if you check all requests, these are what we're seeing. If you're filtering for JavaScript, there's nothing. There's no JavaScript. Obviously, React and sort of the Next.js application and everything is still alive at the server. I mean, we're creating everything with React, which is a huge benefit because it's a wonderful way to compose UI. But we're not shipping the runtime. We're basically just shipping the Java, the CSS and the HTML, and that's it.
Cool. Is this something that you do like on the server side? So actually saying telling the server ship that as a response?
Yes, this is it's a configuration for the framework. So depending on your framework, there's
different ways to do that essentially. Yeah.
But essentially, you're telling the framework to not ship JavaScript for these pages. Just do the HTML and CSS and be done with it. There's an obvious downside to this, and that's if we go back to the one that has JavaScript, we can see that we've got stuff like search functionality. Like this is made with React, where you can search for things here, and there's a basket on the side, which is also made with React. So if you want to go down this path, you have to find alternative ways of delivering that same experience to the users without using React. So you could argue that that going down this path requires a developer that knows a lot about the framework, but also a lot about the life outside frameworks too. Like how does things look in vanilla land, right?
Yeah.
And how would you do things there? But if you want that, this is sort of the icing on the cake. If you want top performance everywhere, this is something that might be an option for you.
Yeah. So it's more like also if it fits what you're trying to build, because search functionality is important in a few websites, for instance, or
exactly. So this might not be a good thing for everybody, and I'm not suspecting that most developers will, change the way they deliver framework assets to do this. But this, I mean, we can reveal in the end some also examples in the real life where this is happening.
Yeah.
But so let's look at what it takes for this to happen. And I need to share another screen. Wait. New share. There we go. Right. So this is the boilerplate code that we're using to deliver this Node.js runtime. There's a wait, there's a page here that's responsible of creating it, and we're essentially adding this single flag. All right, there we go. This is a currently unstable function for Next.js, but I haven't encountered a single problem with it so far. Essentially, it's just taking away all that JavaScript. So this is how you would configure that with Next.js, assuming you're on version 9.4, 5. I'm not exactly sure, but
yeah,
something like that.
Which means that you can define which pages or classes of pages are able to use JavaScript and what not. So maybe some of your content, static pages could just run without it, whereas
yeah,
you know, categorical pages and things like that, product listing, use that for filtering and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. This is something that, at least for Next.js, this is an option. So some pages have runtime JS, and some pages don't. Which is actually a really, really cool option. So if you want to try this out yourself with Next.js, you can start off with one page and see what it takes to make that work, essentially. Then move on, incrementally adopt it. So this is all it takes to actually turn off all JavaScript. So then the next question is, like, okay, I still want this menu, right? I still want let me share the Chrome thing again. So if you go back to this guy here, and I'm gonna emulate the device mode here. You want this menu thing to work, and for now let's just concentrate on this one feature, because I don't want to show off how to do this for every interactive feature, but this is a very simple one to do. So obviously this now in the runtime JS example, this is done with React and use state. You know, is menu active or not? Just flipping a switch. So we need to recreate this for the no runtime version. So we want the same kind of behavior here. And if I click here, you can see it's been recreated. Let me quickly show. And this is basically, most of people watching will probably already know how to do that. But just for reference, I'm gonna show you what it takes to do it. And remember now, we're making the decision now to not ship that 600 or so kilobytes of JavaScript, as well as a good portion of state and all the rehydration. We're not doing any of that anymore. And there's a trade in here. So what we need to do instead is to do something like this. This is our burger button itself. And there's some inline JavaScript here to take care of the event binding that needs to happen. It's going to get shipped with the HTML. It's not even a JavaScript file, which you can have if you want to. But this is essentially all you need. And if what you're using React for on the client side is to toggle a menu like this, that you don't need it. You don't at all. You can easily do this without it. So this one, this will, if I remove this, it said this is the MVP version. This one toggles the menu only, show and hide. And this next part here will also automatically hide the menu if you click one of the links inside it, which is just a nice to have thing. So that's all you need, really. There's nothing else to it. Obviously, you need to code this in vanilla. You could, now this is like cursing in the church, or a similar English expression. You can also have jQuery in here if you absolutely cannot deal with that framework of some or a library of some sort, if you want to. But you don't have to. There's plenty, like the web APIs we have today to enable this kind of feature. They're so good, and there's no reason, at least from what I'm seeing, to have those libraries in here. Yeah, so that's all it takes.
Cool, awesome. So next question will be something like, we had this discussion a little bit in the past where we talked about like how performance could be improved, for instance, when a framework loads fonts, third-party fonts, Google fonts, right? So which decrease performance because you fetch more stuff in, basically. Yeah. So would you expect, like, would it be something, I guess not, but that you would see like a trend in the future trying to prove that in the engine itself, like trying to find a middle ground in between serving and not serving JavaScript?
I'm not really getting the question. Is it specifically for fonts?
No, not at all. Because like we like in the past where we discussed about fonts, you and I, we had I actually had that as a personal question, but it's like my performance is dropping when I'm loading fonts. So it's maybe something that people will be looking into how they can solve it in the future, right? So will be like the case with loading JavaScript and actually how performant and CPU consuming it would be to follow that path of loading JavaScript in the front end, something that people, in the future, maybe they could take a look into solving. Or
I mean, it's at least getting more attention now than it has in the past, which is really good. And I do see people now doing basically static generation of HTML, CSS, and then sprinkle some own JavaScript on top, which I'm really like. My prediction would be that this is more for those who are really into performance and they want to go that extra mile to make magic happen.
That essentially would go back and go actually to using vanilla JavaScript rather than the modern frameworks themselves.
Yeah.
So okay, cool.
So I guess it's all a question of if is it worth it?
Yeah.
I mean, how much do you gain? Trade-off, essentially. Yeah. And we forgot to show the results of this, though. I think I didn't run a test.
Oh yeah.
Do we want to run a test?
Sure thing.
Ooh, this is the exciting part. We took away all the JavaScript, right? And what did we gain from that? So let me just move this a bit. So this is the URL you want to test, and this is what we had in the past. So let me just kick this off. So I hope to see a decrease in time to interactive. I'm also assuming that there's going to be no blocking time, essentially. Let's see what happens. Oh man,
that's quite a bit of.
Oh man, yeah. I don't think I should say anything now. We can just look at this beautiful page for a minute.
New thumbnail uploaded,
Well, essentially, it's still a very large document, but because we're not doing any stuff on the client side for JavaScript and rehydration, we're letting the browser do its job the way it knows it best, and that's just to lay out the document that you created. And we ensured that we still have interactivity with a small JavaScript snippet that we added. So to move from this to this, just with the small trick that we did, I would say it's worth it in a lot of cases, more than you would think.
I see. That's a big jump in performance.
It is a massive jump.
Yeah, it's insane.
So this is we can mention as well. It's a load performance. It's that initial hit of the page. So when you take away the framework files, you also take away stuff like optimistically loading next pages or routes. I mean, subsequent navigation will be faster once all the framework files are downloaded and stuff like that. Because with this Node.js runtime approach, you would have to go to the server every time to fetch the new page. So you need to make sure that's fast. So there's this trade-off too, that you need to consider if you want to go down this road.
Nice.
Yeah. So we can reveal now that we're using this technique on our own webpage. So if you open crystallize.com, which is the front page here is quite image heavy. We even have videos. There's like
4 videos loading.
Yeah, and there's like this primitive slider here, and quite a lot of content too. It's not a small, tiny front page, but we're using this technique here on this front page as well as a good amount of the other pages as well here, but not all of them. So this is our own website is an example of a hybrid solution.
Yeah.
So some of the pages that don't have runtime, and some other pages they do, because the client side logic on those pages are simply, it's too much of an effort to recreate in vanilla, and the framework really helps out. And that's pages like, for instance, if you want a paginated list, like so this one here, the blog page, it has a runtime JS, simply because it's just so easy to make this this paginated list of blog posts. Whereas the individual blog posts themselves, they don't have a runtime. We don't need a runtime here, so we've taken that away. We made the decision to take it away to boost performance. So.
Nice. So it's a matter of preference, experience as well, and decision making, and like which we also want to aim for performance for obvious benefits.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's true. I will mention though, I mean, we will never have this no runtime option flag set to true, essentially, like forcing people to enable it.
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea to let all the developers have all the flexibility and the powers of the framework, and then make an informed decision on turning it off if they want to.
Yeah.
But I hope this was an example of how much it can improve your performance.
Certainly. So yeah, that was really great and super informative, Håkon. Thank you a lot for that. And my pleasure. So yeah, and to you guys, everyone who joined, thank you so much. I'm not sure if you have anything else to add, Håkon. Of course, you may go and do that.
Yeah, I guess I'll ask a final note here. I mean, this is, and we have to admit, we're recording this in January 2021. Yes. So in a year, things might have changed. So there's some cool initiatives, especially in React, to enable, well, not just React. Let me scratch that. All major frameworks are sort of have initiatives here to find a good way to recreate that client state application, doing partial rehydration. It's a really tough problem to do. And there, specifically for React, there's React server components that have been talked a bit about, which is not a replacement for SSR. It's more like a complement. This could help this out with this rehydration thing, because essentially you're relieving the client of a bunch of work that you can just say that this is the server's responsibility. Don't do it.
I see. So it's more like, for people that don't want to dive into, working with vanilla and changing the code that much, and they actually prefer using, frameworks essentially.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's sort of from the framework perspective. That's something that can really help out with these issues. And once that is sort of stable and out there, we can do another take on this where we're trying these new cool features out.
Yeah, that's really nice. Mm-hmm. Great. That was a great outro. There's like a shine of hope.
There is definitely
a middle ground that there is certainly there. Cool. Thanks everyone for joining. For any questions to Håkon, please go ahead and use the community, the Slack community channel.
Go there. I'm also on Twitter, so don't be afraid.
Yeah, so any channel you can reach out to Håkon for sure, or the rest of the team for sure. Thank you for joining, and we'll